And I just like that. But normally I like to get rid of paintings.
You say you just like that. You just like that, or it means something particular because the symbols are particularly strong symbols here?
Well, it's a painting that was a sort of, in a way, a mid-stage between something that was representational. It was one that was quite highly coloured, very highly stylized as well. And it had various experiments in it which were, in a way, a turning point. One example is that I had various areas of colours which I surrounded by an equal black line, and that isolated the colours, but it also at the same time made the design feel stronger, and that just worked. It was just one of those sort of paintings that sort of worked at that time, and I often look at it. But normally I don't like to look at my work after a while. I get not exactly tired of it, but I'd like to get rid of it and go on to something else. Mm-hmm. And once again, if you see them in a gallery, of course, they take on a different mood or meaning. But I like to start on something new.
You mentioned you're still working on the Spanish theme.
I'm working on the Spanish and on the Polish one, more or less, sort of alternatively.
Do you play music when you're working?
Yes.
You mentioned Spanish music
yes,
in particular.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
That influences the output and the style and the...
I don't like background music, but I think I love flamenco music, and flamenco music to a great extent is often played within a noise of a lot of Spanish people or in a cafe or a restaurant, and I find that works very well with my work. Well, I don't like sort of endless pop music just playing just to sort of kill a quietness. Mm-hmm. That just would actually put me off from painting.
You're using music much more proactively as part of the creative process.
It is really, yes. Yeah.
And the Polish stuff, is there music involved in that, or...?
No, that's purely ideas. The idea of going to Poland, seeing lots of different shapes and ideas and different ways of living, if you like, that somebody in Poland wouldn't actually even notice. I did, because it's completely different. And I just found I had a wealth of ideas. I spent some time in the Jewish district in Krakow, and from that I've got quite a lot of ideas for paintings, which I know will keep me for the next year or so, I'm quite sure.
I won't say how do you get ideas, but how do you set up situations which will, you believe, create more ideas?
It really, in a way, happens. It's just something that you know you're keen on. The original idea that you're very keen on, and it excites you, and you do it, and you think, yes, you know, I could do something from that, and so it goes on. And I think if you're sort of excited about something, it just has its own momentum.
I was thinking the mountains, the snow. Yeah. You said you went down the Jewish quarter. Yeah. Do you find by going to a different sort of environment, it's more likely, therefore, because it's fresh to generate new thoughts and therefore new ideas?
Yes, really stupid things. They can be things like just a little box of flowers on a windowsill or something. There's a cemetery in Krakow where I've been several times. It's one of the oldest in Poland, I believe. And they've got some little flowers and whatever, which are quite unusual because, for example, Jewish people don't put flowers on graves, they put stones, which is another thing. And these stones, of course, are shapes that you can use in your paintings as well. And I've done this a lot. But to see this one vase of flowers in a certain place actually gave me an idea for a painting. And I did a very, very quick sketch while I was there. And that will make quite a large painting, a feature painting.
So you already have mapped out some future ideas. Oh, yes. How far ahead, I mean, you know you've got things you want to do. Do you know in 2 or 3 years where you might be going?
Not exactly,
what directions?
Not exactly, but I do know that I'm always way behind what I want to do. I mean, I always sort of I have more ideas than I can sort of cope with in a way, and sometimes time passes so much that the sort of ideas got lost, and I never do it.
But would you say the strongest ideas survive natural selection?
Yes. Yes, some things that always keep coming back, and you do a drawing and that always sort of skids around the studio, and that turns up as being, the painting that you want to finish.
Nick, your work's very abstract. Has it always been as abstract as it is now?
Not really. Not really. When I left college, I was doing very representational work, but I didn't feel really that's what I wanted to do. So I spent, well, quite a long time actually experimenting to push representational things into an abstracted form, something that I had a sort of a freedom to work in, if you like.
Did that happen sequentially, or did you have a blinding flash of inspiration and change styles, or?
Well, I just felt that I wanted to, for me, I don't really like representational work. This is for me, that is. I feel that if you want to do something that's totally representational, it's better to make a photograph of it or whatever. That would certainly be my case. But so what I wanted to do was actually to make a series of languages, if you want, a series of subjects that I could colour and I could make that were based on something that was representational, but would in fact, when you see the end result, wouldn't be. But it'd be my way of portraying that particular subject.
You say languages, a series of languages, symbols or representations?
Symbols, really. Symbols that mean something for me. I mean, I can sort of have a certain symbol which I like, and I feel I can...
Such as?
Something, it could be like a tremendous loop or a large triangle which could be have a certain line or a shape on it. For example, I did quite a lot of landscapes, my style of landscapes, using a series of dots. Well, those dots, for example, I got from the sides of motorways where they are planting new trees. And as you sort of pass between them, you see all these dots, and then they turn into lines. Well, these I just made a note of these, and actually I use these in paintings where there isn't such a thing, but it's just a shape that I like. And according to the syntactic structure, if you like, of these shapes, then that's how the painting arrives.
So your current style evolved through a series of processes, experiments?
Yes, experimental work. Two types of experiments, really. One which was black and white, and one which was very highly coloured. And these were actually, in a way, very disciplined, and over a period of about 10 or 12 years. And I was working to a goal, a very, very simple goal, really, I just wanted a way to express an idea in my own style. I could see something, and then I could say, yes, I want to paint that.
Word discipline, did you mean discipline as an artist, or discipline within the work of art?
Well, both in a way. I mean, I feel that I treat painting like work. I mean, I'm quite disciplined in that respect. I mean, I don't believe in blind inspiration, and one carries on like that. What I like to do is just to simply see something and, as I say, know the way I want to paint it. And I know that if I have these disciplined experiments in a certain order, then I know that I can do that.
You say there, and you know the way you want to paint it. By that, you don't necessarily imply there is only one way to paint it.
Oh, no,
you have a whole series of different forms of that representation?
Sure, yes. I mean, quite often I can get one idea, and I need to do maybe a dozen paintings until I've really got it right. There are many sort of, quite often, in fact, when you do the first painting, you feel, well, I haven't done that adequately. I can push it further, and then from that you can push something else further, and so it goes on.
What are the sorts of variables that might change in that series?
Oh, certainly there are some areas which, in a painting, certainly if it's quite a busy painting, it can be actually magnified in one corner. We find that that painting is a painting in its own right. When you actually make that painting in its own right, you find that something will spark off from that. It needs a certain balance or a certain colour.
Colour, you have very strong colour combinations.
Yes.
Are they always the same? Were they colours you've always used?
Well, actually not. I mean, when I was making experiments with colour, when I was talking about the sort of black and white and the colour experiments, I used a lot of greens and browns and so forth, which I hardly ever use at all now. Because from using those, I found those that weren't the colours that I was happy with. I've got a very limited palette, and I don't actually mix colour either. I mix it, if it accidentally mixes or overlaps on a painting, that's fine, that's good. And there are quite often, there's sort of, in a way, accidental, semi-accidental marks, which are probably the most successful parts of a painting. So, yes, a big area of one colour means something, and a small area of another means something else. And that is just as much the importance in a painting as the shape of that colour.
I haven't seen your most recent work, but the stuff I've seen up until recently, very strong bold colours, reds, yellows, blues.
Right.
You mentioned greens and browns that have disappeared out of your painting.
That's right.
Was it because they weren't bold enough, or...?
I just felt that I hadn't got a sort of, in a way, a rapport with those colours. Some of the yellows and some of the reds that I use, very much connected with the subject that I'm doing. For example, a lot of the reds and yellows that I'm using at the moment are based on Spanish music, for example. But something that was a brown just didn't, well, to use a silly phrase, just didn't do anything for me. It was just a dead colour, and I like them to be vibrant. Even if they're sombre, they have to be vibrant.
Would you say reds and yellows are more indicative of the Spanish landscape and therefore Spanish music and therefore reflected in your art?
Well, certainly much the Catalan colours, and yes, that's right, the warmth. I like a warm colour, but I also, to a certain extent, like to, and quite often do, balance them with cold colours as well. So, for example, in another series that I've done recently, and I'm still working on, incidentally, was a series from Polish landscapes. I've just come back from spending some time in Poland, and from those I've used actually whites and purpley blues, again against some reds, which have formed something which is very living and vibrant. A painting has to live.
Are they effectively reflective of the weather in those countries that has an impacts on the environment in actual fact?
I wouldn't exactly say the weather, but to a certain extent the atmosphere that the weather creates. One painting I've done is called Morskie Oko, which was a result of a long walk, a country walk, through snow and through ice, and to arrive halfway at a station near a mountain. And there's a lake, a frozen lake, which is called Morskie Oko, which means the eye of the mountain. And suddenly I had an idea for painting, and the colour sequences were almost obvious.
I suppose thinking through that question again, perhaps I meant light rather than weather in the mountains and the snow, the parabolic mirror that you saw and influenced some of the whole period of your work, I believe, isn't it?
That's right. Yes, exactly. Those were from the same type of landscape, really. Those were the types of painting I did in 1978 from the south of France. Yes, exactly. I mean, that was very much a reflective idea in every sense of the word, which gave me the landscape idea plus the feeling of the landscape. So, of course, the colour combinations were, in a way, almost obvious.
And that's very suitable to your style because the sharpness of colours in snow mountains and shadows and direct lines and colour combinations.
It also gave me a freedom, too. The big problem with my work is the fact that although I'm very disciplined in that respect, I also want the freedom to make, if you like, the excitement of the original sketch. Quite often you do a sketch and it works brilliantly and you say, okay, I'll take that home and make a painting from it, and the painting just dies on you. That to my way of thinking, is because it's lost its sort of initial spontaneity, which you do have to have, I think, when being excited about a painting. So I have to try and combine the two. So although I use very free brush strokes, well, not brush strokes because I don't actually use brushes, but using free movement, I have to have that within my series of languages and shapes.
You mentioned you don't use brushes.
No.
That's a strange admission for a non-artist.
Well, well, occasionally I use brushes, but very, very occasionally. Normally I use rags dipped in the actual paint, so I squeeze the paint straight onto the rag and paint with that, and paint with that with varying degrees of turpentine, so I know exactly. This is the whole point of this discipline, is knowing exactly what the paint will do, and that's how I have that freedom.
So the tool gives you more freedom.
Oh,